And the Deputy Premier and Commerce Minister Kittirat Ranong has unveiled the government's blueprint to rebalance the Thai economy with an initial target to boost domestic consumption by 250 billion baht in the first year. In an interview with Nation Multimedia Group, Kittirat said Thailand should reduce its dependence on the export sector, which currently accounts for 60 to 70% of the gross domestic product. Instead, the country should boost domestic consumption to drive economic growth. Kittirat said the Yingluck government's key economic policies would help rebalance the economy over the next several years. One of these policies is to guarantee paddy rice at 15,000 baht per ton, compared to the prevailing market price of less than 10,000 baht via the government's rice pledging scheme. Another key policy is to increase the daily minimum wage nationwide by 40%, with Bangkok and 6 other provinces taking the lead from January 2012 onwards by raising the wage from about 220 baht to 300 baht per day. Kittirat said the government's temporary suspension of oil fund levies on petrols, gasohol and diesel, making energy prices cheaper by 2 to 7% for 2 to 7 baht per liter, was also part of this economic rebalancing agenda. All these measures are interlinked as the government aims to reduce the cost of energy for consumers and businesses while boosting farmers' and workers' incomes, he said. Kittirat, who was previously president of Shinawatra University, founded by ex-premier Thaksin Shinawatra, said the economic rebalancing, if successful, would add an estimated 250 billion baht to the 10 trillion baht Thai economy. This would represent a 2.5% of annual GDP, largely resulting from more purchasing power for the grassroots population, whose incomes will be increased by higher rice prices and minimum wages. Unlike the rich and middle-income earners, low-income people tend to spend most additional income to improve their quality of life, so the domestic economy would directly benefit from the government's rebalancing policy, he said. However, the rice pledging scheme to boost the domestic price of paddy rice to 15,000 baht per ton is controversial. It has drawn strong opposition from rice exporters who predict Thailand will lose significant share of the world's rice market due to the price hike. Critics are also concerned that there could be massive corruption in the scheme, which requires the government to borrow as much as 400 billion baht in the first year. The 300 baht daily minimum wage is also facing strong opposition from the private sector, who said a 40% jump in labor costs was not practical because productivity would not increase correspondingly. Kittirat said the government would cut the corporate income tax rate from 30% to 23% next year to help the private sector, while the finance ministry will offer tax incentives on machinery investment to boost productivity. The Deputy PM said that Thailand's inflation at around 4% was still relatively low compared to other trading partners and competitors. As a result, he was not worried that wage and rice price policies would spur cost of living rises to an extent they destabilize the economy.
Of the Thai economy, the government's policy is trying to put more money into the pockets of the low-income people, and also trying to boost the domestic demand as opposed to relying on the export earnings to grow the Thai economy. Can you elaborate on that, on the policy of the government to try to promote more income distribution?
To be precise, I think we all have to accept that the Thai economy has been the so-called export-led growth, especially in the past 14, 15 years after the float of the Thai baht, after the Tom Yam Goong economic crisis. And of course, with the success of the export, the Thai economy can grow in the range of 3 to 6% in the last decade and a half. Now it's time that we have to review the situation we have now. Of course, we seem to have some concern that in the West, our major markets, which include the United States and EU, they're suffering some problem, and maybe in a few years' time, they might not be as strong markets for us to export to. Luckily, the countries in East Asia and ASEAN doing better, and we are exporting our products to these countries too. However, very interesting that when we observe the growth in the past, we haven't really seen the domestic demand performing its role. Because when we talk about domestic demand, I'm not only talking about the macroeconomic factor, but we're talking about those people in the economy, in the country, that if we have been enjoying some economic prosperity, if the members in this economy can consume better, it might explain good distribution of income. But if not, perhaps the wealth congested only at the top level of the people. So we are worried that these several million people, if they still suffer with low wages and also low income, which includes those people both in the urban area working at those factories, and also the rural area, which includes the rice farmers. So
hence the minimum wage of 300 baht.
Yes.